Production underwriting for Ruckus has been made possible in part by the generous contributions from Fred and Lou Hartwig and from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Ruckus, our weekly food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. Now let's meet tonight's panelists, the Ruckettes. Yael Abahaka is a columnist and editorial writer at the Kansas City Star. Gwen Grant is president and CEO of the Urban League. Mary O'Halloran is a media and communications consultant. Steve Marakian, a local attorney with the firm of Wersch, Hobbs, and Marakian in downtown Kansas City. And I'm Mike Shannon. How one stands on a couple of issues will almost surely reveal whether that person is, at heart, a Democrat or a Republican, more liberal or more conservative. And it's our good fortune on Ruckus that those issues are now front and center in the Missouri legislature. The first is right to work, generally defined as the right of employees to decide for themselves whether or not to join or financially support a union. Kansas already is a right to work state, as are 23 others. A previous statewide vote in Missouri to approve right to work was defeated. But these are different times and union membership is declining. So, Steve, what are the chances, do you think, of Missouri becoming the 25th right to work state in the United States?
You know, I think it'll be very close. I think it will pass, or however they're going to handle it, whether it's going to be put to the voters through some sort of an amendment, or whether it's going to go to the legislature. I think it's going to be adopted in Missouri. It's a very complicated issue, and one that, you talk about liberal and conservative and so forth and so on. And I've struggled with this for a number of years because, I think there are certainly valid arguments on the union side that someone should not benefit by the things unions negotiate without contributing and being involved. I certainly understand that issue. There are also, certain freedom issues in terms of why should I have to join, why should my ability to work be based upon these things. So these aren't simple issues, and I have struggled with it for a number of years. I think I probably come down politically and from an economic point of view on the right to work side, only because I think that that the freedom to do this may stimulate business and hiring and so forth. But I certainly understand those who adamantly oppose right to work legislation, and that's why I think it's 23 states and 27 on the other side.
A sympathetic conservative.
Wow, yes, Steve.
I'm not anti-union at all.
It's good to hear that you're kind of middle of the road on this. But just the very title of the legislation, right to work, implies that people suddenly don't have the right to work in the state, which doesn't make any sense. But the important thing is that having a collective bargaining unit is really important in the history of labor for this country, and to benefit from having collective bargaining and then not have, and you don't, as far as I don't know where you are compelled to join. So I think you have the right not to join a union. Right. So what is this all about is the big question.
But you don't have the right to avoid paying dues in states that are not right to work.
Then call it something that's clarified. Because when you put right to work on a ballot
they do have collective bargaining units at these places that are non-union, but the union just can't compel people to join it.
Right. Exactly.
Well, you can't compel people to pay the dues. But they can feel free not to join the union or to join the union. That's always been the case. Gwen wonderfully described this benefit that we have. If you're a person going to work every day, and you have under the Constitution of the United States the right to bargain collectively with your employer for your wages, your benefits, and the things that really matter most to your family, that is proven to be in the United States a very sound way for progress to be made for middle income and working class people. And there isn't any reason to attack this law right now in the state of Missouri. There's no great.
You mean bring it forward and put it before the people?
Mike, in 1978, the last time it was on the ballot, Gwen, you probably remember that. Boy, was it a good organizing tool for labor. There are some labor people.
It was soundly defeated, if I remember correctly.
Yes, it was a great effort.
What do you think about this, Yael? Why do you think it seems that some of the states that are right to work are prospering economically? They are seeing businesses move there.
Well, I mean, first of all, some other states are doing well the other way. I mean, the 27 aren't all on the bottom, so I don't think there's so many other factors here. But what I'd like to say is I haven't belonged to a union for the 30-some-odd years I worked at the Star, but in this day and age when there's a collection of wealth is more concentrated at the top, where in a recession where companies have much more power to basically let go of employees or whatever, I think, and the power of unions are going down, I think this is an opportune time for the people who want to collect wealth even more to strike to try to destroy unions a little bit more. Have there been rapacious unions that have taken advantage of owners? Of course. But have there been owners who take advantage of companies that aren't unionized? Absolutely. So, I mean, I'm kind of like with Steve. There are good arguments to a degree on both sides, but I would never, ever want to really live in a country without unions where they can. I've had personal recognition with people who have been protected by a union against somebody who's trying to happen to them, that a private sector employee, they've been out in their ear, and this union protected that employee for a good reason.
And I've worked in these situations where you don't have to be in the union, but there is a union. And the union does at least afford to even the non-members a voice to deal with management.
Well, the other thing, Mike, is this, that the unions are so good at, or the unions are, the reason I am not anti-union is that a lot of the things that employers who don't have unions do is because they want to improve working conditions precisely because they know otherwise they're going to be forced into it.
Yeah. A lot of manufacturers like unions because of the training and the excellence and the professionalism it brings to the workforce.
One time I was in management in a broadcast company and dealt with a lot of employees, and you loved the union because it made everything down on paper. There was no debating with everybody. Exactly. You can't have that day off. No, it's in the contract. You're off that day. You're not off this day. And it was a real convenience.
It worked.
Another hot button issue in Missouri that almost always separates left from right, Democrat from Republican, is photo ID. Again, this is the law in Kansas. Excuse me. It simply requires a voter at the polls to show an identification card with his or her picture on it. The GOP says it's designed to ensure that vote fraud is minimized. Democrats argue it's designed to suppress Democratic voter turnout among the poor, disabled, elderly, and minorities. Previous efforts have run into roadblocks from governor's vetoes and court decisions. Implementing photo ID requires a constitutional amendment that requires an election. So might this be the year that voters with or without their photo IDs go to the polls and approve it in Missouri? Gwen?
Well, you know, that's highly questionable. It has passed the Missouri House of Representatives, but now it has, I think, is going to face a more serious challenge in the Senate. Senate President Pro Tem Tom Dempsey has already stated that he doesn't see it as a priority and that the Senate is more focused on getting Missourians back to work, which, you know, I applaud him for that response, which makes sense. The thing about this legislation that is troubling is I did a little research because we keep talking about, you know, preventing voter fraud. So we're going to waste taxpayer dollars, spending a bunch of time in the House at the state level, putting forward an initiative that would cause to go to the to be on the ballot to minimize voter fraud when there have been only 2 documented incidents of voter fraud that can be addressed with a voter ID in the state of Missouri since the year 2000. I mean, this is totally ridiculous. We do not have a voter fraud problem, and you want to get it down less than 2? Is this so? We're going to have a constitutional amendment so that less than 2. Now, if you look at other areas where having some type of protection would be appropriate, it's not the person showing up at the polls and presenting false information and voting. That's not where the problem is. The problem would be with absentee voting or those issues. But even when you look at that, there's not material evidence at a state level or on a national level that justifies all of this voter ID.
Assuming that to be true, and I don't know that it is.
Oh, no, I've done my research. It is true.
Well, you know, in one state. But I was going to say to Steve, there's something I believe called the expressive function of the law. The law should say what we believe as a value. Would it be anything wrong to point out that a law says you have to be who you say you are to be qualified to vote, and you have to be able to prove it?
No, and I understand what Gwen is saying.
Yeah.
I quite frankly, I didn't do the research Gwen did, so I can't cite the sources right now. But there are maybe not in Missouri, and I don't know that. There are other studies that show voter fraud is a problem, but I ignore that because yes, there are. But I ignore that because I'm going to answer your question. Okay. Here's the deal: we can argue to a blue in the face about whether you can prove that there's 2 cases or 1,000 cases. Okay. Voting is a right, but only certain people have the right to vote. Okay. To ask someone in this day and age to show a photo ID is such an absolutely minimal intrusion that it seems to me anyone who argues against that is doing it for some sort of a view that, well, we're afraid that if you require this, you're going to suppress only a certain kind of vote. And that troubles me. That troubles me.
It seems to me that anyone
Kansas did not have suppression, and they have the voter ID.
For voter ID
Of course, we're all
is
Republicans.
someone who has a motive of voter suppression. That's what it was saying, because there's no other rationale. Because to register to vote, I'm going to answer your question. Because to register to vote, one has to present data that validates who he or she is in order to register to vote. So you go through a voter registration process that requires multiple validations of identification to register to vote.
Why would somebody feel suppressed from voting if he or she were a legitimate voter and had an ID? It's not hard to get.
There are so many other technicalities in the voter ID, in the government-issued ID problem. You have people who, especially elderly people, who can be challenged to have the supporting documentation that they need to take to the state to get the state ID. Case in point, if you are my mother, for instance, is 88 years old. The town she was born in doesn't even exist anymore. She doesn't have a voter ID anymore.
So if she had to,
but why? What is the whole point? The person.
The whole point is to say that only people who are legally qualified to vote are doing the voting. 18 cases of vote fraud being investigated in one county in Ohio. In one county in Ohio.
That's the best you can do, Mike.
It's 18 in one county.
Look at several sources. Look at several sources before you quote
the month
that kind
of
data.
March. Well, I did. I'm just citing one example to refute your 2 in Kansas or Missouri, whatever it was.
Well, we're talking about Missouri.
We're talking about the issue.
The
month of March, just a few days away, brings March Madness and a new Kansas City, Missouri budget. Not that the 2 are necessarily related. Talking about the proposed document, Mayor Sly James says the budget offers incremental change and is pragmatic in approach. What about the future? The mayor told the Star we still need to have a huge infusion of money for infrastructure, and at some appropriate time in the future, we're going to have to talk about that. Well, let's talk about that now. What do you think the mayor has in mind? Another bond package, Jill?
Well, at some point, I'm sure the mayor would want to do that. He has talked about, previous mayors have talked about the infrastructure backlog, needing to be, bridges and highway roads and all that kind of stuff being improved, public buildings especially. Now, even with those needs, at some point you have to prove you're spending the money correctly. And taxpayers just gave the mayor and council another $35 million last year. They want to make sure the road repairs are going to be done as the mayor has promised. They want to make sure the park department is improved, again, as the mayor and parks department have promised. And you won't know that probably for another year or so. I mean, at the very least, they have to go through a budget year to see, yeah, we really did improve the roads, and here's our schedule, and here's what we're doing. I think the good thing is that the tax election that was endorsed last year did set out a way of spending some of the money. It also got rid of the motor vehicle fee, which a lot of people, I hope, noticed that they didn't have to pay $12.50 a vehicle on their property tax bill this year. Some of the small property taxes will go away next year. So again, if you're having a 2014 vote, say, you can say, hey, did you notice you saved 20 or 30 bucks or whatever on your property tax bill? So I think the mayor's headed for a 2014 thing. I do think if they do a property tax increase, which is probably likely given all the higher sales taxes we're paying, it's going to be something where, and yes, your property taxes will go up to pay for bonds. This city, especially under Mayor Kay Barnes, God bless her, paid for or issued a lot of bonds, but we did not increase the property tax to pay for it, which meant when the bills came due, we had to cut back
Comes out of the city budget,
like
right?
That. Yeah.
The general fund.
And so that's not good. The mayor and Troy Schulte, the city manager, have said, "No, we don't want to do that anymore." Hopefully, if there's a 2014 vote, they'll do that.
The proposed budget for the coming fiscal year, how much is it? How much over $1 billion is it?
That's like 1.3, which really hasn't grown that much during the recession. But the good thing is, though, even though it's still, everybody will always say, it's tight. It's so tight. But, you know, they finally are able to give some raises. They are able to improve some of the departments, like the road maintenance and the Parks Department. This is probably one of the healthiest budgets, again, thanks to the taxpayers that I've seen in probably the last 5 to 8 years. I mean, even before the recession.
Things are going well.
When the mayor says we need better infrastructure, what is he talking about? I don't mean specific street addresses, but when you use the term infrastructure, which is used all the time, what does that mean?
He's talking in Kansas City about those pesky sewers, you know.
Well, sidewalks.
The bonds for
streets.
Sewers. And of course, people's water bill are going to skyrocket, right, Yale?
Yes, they are.
And boy, have they voted in a passel of taxes to bring about this period of good time. But you have to give the mayor credit. I mean, the city is now on pretty good footing. He's also working with Troy Schulte. However, I'm very concerned with, as some people are in the city, about the use of the transportation tax. There are people who are concerned that he will be shifting the existing set-aside tax for transportation to finance the lovely streetcar that's going to go from the
two-mile starter system.
Right.
Just before we go, primary election in Kansas City, Kansas, February 26th.
Oh, yeah.
We discussed the mayor's race a couple of times. The star is endorsed. Who?
Mark Holland as the candidate who makes it through the primary election next Tuesday and to the general election, and then wins in April.
Did you did the star recommend another candidate to get through the primary?
The other candidate we had positive words to say about is Ann Murguia, but to be clear, Mark Holland is our choice for both the primary and the general.
And there are a couple of
there were some
council,
commission races.
Yes. But
yes, sir.
We don't need to talk about those.
Okay, we won't.
Time is
Mark
short.
Holland,
We rarely have the chance to discuss papal politics on Ruckus, but rarely does a pope step down, resign, retire, or abdicate, take your pick. Such is the case with Pope Benedict XVI, who will serve until the end of this month. Then the College of Cardinals will convene and anoint a new leader of the world's more than 1 billion Roman Catholics. One wonders what effect, if any, a new papacy will have on the controversies surrounding the Kansas City St. Joseph Diocese, headed by Bishop Robert Finn. Finn is the first major church official convicted of failing to report a priest suspected of child sex abuse to authorities. But before we get to that, let me talk to Mary here for a moment. Mary, as we know, was formerly a nun. You've mentioned that a couple of times on the program over the years. What kind of a reaction did you have when you heard the news the Pope is resigning? I mean, that's virtually unheard of.
I thought I had the wrong station on the dial when making this up. Popes die in office. They don't step down. Well, he's tired, obviously, and he's tired of the job. And he's a fairly independent fellow, and he's decided he's going off in hiding, if one believes some conspiracy theories, and living with women in a nunnery, which is has some irony to it. My personal feelings about this are all wound up, like many Catholics are, with the kind of pope he has been and the sort of authority that he's wielded. He has been an incredibly good authoritarian leader if you want to move the church back to the Middle Ages. His attitudes toward women in the church are no different from his predecessor, but in particular, the way he has failed to handle the sexual abuse scandal that is global, Mike, has tainted everything that we will remember about this pope.
All right, let's get to that local
Sure.
situation.
Sure.
Is it possible, conceivable, likely that a new pope, depending on who it is, of course, that a new pope might take some action that would change the leadership of the Kansas City St. Joseph Diocese?
Oh, it is indeed. Only the pope has the authority to move bishops anywhere they want to move them. And, It will depend upon whether or not the Pope, of course, a new Pope isn't likely to issue that kind of order on day 2. What Catholic people are concerned about is, will the new Pope, popes, by the way, are not the center of people's faith. Mine either, Mike. I don't know a Catholic person who centers the vitality of their faith around who the Pope is, how the Pope got elected, what the Pope thinks today about any particular issue. What they do care about is that the Pope is a symbol of unity for Catholics around the world, and this Pope has become a symbol of division. And until he takes responsibility for making the books wide open, all across the world, we have a Pope from a Cardinal from Los Angeles who will be voting, who was involved in elaborate schemes to cover up the most vicious kinds of crimes over a period of years.
Steve, your law firm has worked with
come.
Bishop Finn during his defense, during his trial. What is his circumstance now? I don't mean anything detailed, but he has to deal with a probation issue, does he not?
Yeah, when there was the plea and the conviction of the misdemeanor, then there are conditions of probation. And as you indicated, because our firm represents Bishop Finn, I can't go into details, but they're sort of standard conditions. And you ask what his condition or what his situation is now. He's still the bishop and will remain the bishop until, unless or until there is some
he
further action by the
continues his
Pope.
assignments as before,
Sure.
and carries out the administration of the diocese as before.
That's right.
Apparently unfettered by other issues.
Yeah, this is these conditions have nothing at all to do with his religious duties, with his functioning as the bishop in this area. And
Steve, I wonder.
Of course, it's true.
About
it's entirely true.
Fact, because
give
we've
me
had
an
letters.
example of where I'm wrong.
We've had
since
Steve,
I'm completely wrong.
Steve, let me ask you about. You said he's carrying out his duties, which I agree, he is carrying out his duties. But the situation he's involved in has so split the Catholic Church locally. It's interesting to me that the person who's on top of the situation, I mean, ahead, in other words, who could change the situation, would not say, well, why can't we get a better leader in there who can unite the Catholic community in the Kansas City area? In other words, so, maybe I'm not convicting Finn here, but I'm saying we can have a better person lead that. That's all.
All right, let's go ahead.
When I said he's carrying out his duties, what I'm saying is the conviction and the probation
doesn't affect his ability to carry it out, or his authority.
But they do affect. That's what I'm saying.
They don't affect his legal authority to carry out his duties.
That's what I'm talking about.
The unfortunate thing is that he won't step down or can't or whatever, which is ridiculous. But the notion of, everything that you said, Mary, was really quite enlightening about the Catholic Church. But the troubling thing for me is that the nature and the extent of child abuse that has occurred in the Catholic Church over the years transcends even this Pope. So why would I think that a new Pope is going to come in and do anything different?
For this reason, the current Pope took all decision-making about sexual abuse to himself, which was highly unusual. So he could have dealt with all of these things. And let me just say about Bishop Finn, Bishop Finn is supposed to be the spiritual leader of the diocese. So whether he can do the legal things
but
is
the
beside
Pope
the
is the Pope is not only a spiritual leader, but he's also the head of state. There's no separation of church and state in the Vatican. All right, and now we head to Roast and Toast, our weekly effort to build up or tear down people and events in the news. And we start tonight with Gwen.
Well, here's a roast for the Republican-controlled Missouri House for wasting time advancing a bill that would require voters to present a government-issued ID to exercise their right to vote, especially when there is no material evidence that voter fraud, the type of voter fraud that would be deterred by a voter ID, even exists in the state. In fact, there have been only 2 such fraud cases in the state since the year 2000. So please stop wasting taxpayers' time and dollars. It is time to get to work on more important issues like Medicaid expansion, jobs creation, and gun control.
My toast is for Sister Berta, the co-founder of Operation Breakthrough. Yesterday, I attended the annual luncheon of an organization called LEAP. It's Lawyers Encouraging Academic Performance. And LEAP delivered a check to Sister Berta for about $68,000. Over the years, LEAP has collected and contributed over $1 million for Operation Breakthrough. This is a wonderful organization, Operation Breakthrough, that functions almost entirely on contributions. It provides child care, health services, school supplies, mentoring to some of the most underprivileged children in our city. The children that Operation Breakthrough helps are an extremely valuable asset to our community. They deserve a chance. People like Sister Berta make that happen. The author of Les Miserables, Victor Hugo, wrote, "One who loves sees the face of God." Sister Berta, you must be blinded by the light.
Well, this is a roast to my overzealous friends in the gun-loving, gun-clean community. These are the ones who say, you know, if they pass a federal law that impinges on the Second Amendment, I'm not going to follow it. But wait a minute, I thought you guys were the law, and mostly guys, you guys are the law-abiding people. So if you're not going to abide by the law, we can come take your guns away, right? Can't wait for that moment.
A roast tonight for Sam Brownback. Governor Brownback in Kansas has caused, according to Bob Sigmund in Wednesday's Kansas City Star, a total fiscal chaotic state in the state of Kansas. And why? Because one judge, and if I had to toast somebody, it would be a Judge Frank Thies with the Shawnee County Court, that decided that the state in the legislature has a constitutional duty to fund schools at their actual cost. They haven't done that since 2008. Brownback has unconstitutionally underfunded the schools. And now he wants to increase everyone's taxes by $455,000 so he can give the money to his friends.
And finally, a toast to the people who have come up with such creative terms for what happened to Marco Rubio during his State of the Union response. There's sip slip, aqua lunge, Watergate, waterfall, and Waterloo. My favorite, however, is a twist on the title of a current controversial movie, Zero Dark Thirsty. Here's to Marco Rubio. And that's Ruckus for this week. We'll be away until March 21st during special programming and Pledge Week activities here at KCPT. Be sure to join Nick Haynes Friday evening at 7:30 for Kansas City Week in Review. The local show is next. Now on behalf of the Ruckettes and the Ruckus crew, Mike Shannon, thanks for watching and good night.